So what we have to do is learn how to take this ego of ours, this part of us that believes that who we are is what we have and what we do and what other people think of us. But remember, if you grow up believing that you are what you do, then when you don't, you aren't. And if you believe that you are what you have, when it's gone, you aren't. And if you believe that you are what other people think of you, your reputation, which we raise people to believe, I have to be concerned with what other people think of me. Take this ego and retrain it. And one of the ways that you do to retrain it is, first, you take this idea that the ego has of fear. What are you afraid of? Anybody out there, what are you afraid of? Shift from fear to curiosity. Become curious about what you're afraid of. That's what Lao Tzu taught me. Become curious about what you're afraid of. You're afraid of flying? Get curious about that. Get interested in that. You're afraid of snakes, you're afraid of disapproval, you're afraid. Just shift from fear and say, I'm going to become more curious about what I'm afraid of. And then take all of the things that you're attached to, like all of your photographs, like all of your furniture, like all of your clothing, like all of the stuff that you find so much attachment to, and start letting it go. Start letting it go. You know, the day that I turned that key on May the 11th in 2006, I didn't even know where I was going. I just knew there was a shift taking place. I felt freer than I'd ever felt, I think, in my life. In my mid-60s, out there on a whole new adventure. And here we are talking about it on national television, on PBS. Take that idea that you have to be attached to things and know that you came in with nothing, with no thing. And you're going to leave with nothing, with no thing. And understand that your life is a parenthesis in eternity. Live there without attachments. And then take your need to be in control of yourself, of others, of the situation, and shift from control to trust. Begin to have a trust. Lao Tzu is profound about this. In each one of the 81 verses, it comes up about 60 times as you look at letting go and letting God, allowing yourself to trust in your nature, allowing yourself to no longer believe that everything has to be controlled by me, and that other people no longer have to be in control of me as well. Begin to trust. Just like you did for the first 9 months. You trusted. Your nose showed up. Your height showed up. Your eyes showed up. Whatever. It all showed up. It's all perfect. It's all divine. So why not wander through your life and have this wonderful, peaceful knowing that it's all fine? And finally, shift from your sense of entitlement. Nobody can treat me that way. I'm entitled to have this. Well, I paid for that. I let go. I mean, that in 1 year, I let go of all of my entitlements. I don't feel I'm entitled to anything. I'm just here. Shift from entitlements to radical humility. Lao Tzu speaks about it so often. Stay humble. Stay low. The greatest leaders are the ones who do the least. The ones who stay back and just model and allow. And at the end of the day, in one of the verses of the Tao, it says, the people will say, we did it ourselves. We did it ourselves. In verse 49 of the Tao Te Ching, here's an exact quote. The sage is kind to the kind and kind to the unkind, because the nature of his being is kindness. And also, be wise and help all beings impartially, abandoning none. You know what I do? Just before I did this program, I have to admit I was nervous. I was humbled by it. Like, who are you, Wayne Dyer? Who are you to read the Tao and believe that you can interpret it on television and interpret it in a book and spend a year and say, like, I got real humble with that. And you know what I say? Tao, which is just another word for God, or Source, or Krishna, or Allah, or whatever you want to call it, guide me. Guide me now. I have that awareness before I come out. If you knew, it says in the Course in Miracles, if you knew who walked beside you, at all times. On this path that you have chosen, you could never experience fear or doubt again. I remember Mother Teresa saying to a dear friend of mine who was asking what could he do? What could he do to do something for her? He was, his name was Pat McMahon. He was on KTR radio in Phoenix. And finally Mother Teresa said to him, "You can do something for me." She said, "Tomorrow morning, get up at 4 a.m. and go out onto the streets of Phoenix and find someone who's living there who believes that he's alone and convince him that he's not." That's what you can do. That's how saints talk. That's how Lao Tzu spoke. Okay, let's go on to the next thought. To change. So you're changing from not trusting in your nature to trusting in your nature. You change your thought from I need more to what I call living contentment. What is this thing about more? It's the mantra of the ego, isn't it? I have to have more. I have to collect more stuff. I have to have more friends. I have to have more money. It's more, 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 more. When where you came from nowhere. You don't need anything. It's a continuous bombardment that we are all exposed to in this whole world of believing that we have to have more. It's one of the reasons why I love public television so much. You don't see ads on PBS. You don't have to be constantly exposed to the idea that you have to have more and you have to get more, and if you don't have this, then you're not complete, and so on. So we get bombarded with this idea of attracting more. And Lao Tzu says, live contentment. Live in a state of being contented. Here's verse 81, the last verse of the Tao Te Ching. My favorite translation of it, and I put it right into the book. Sages do not accumulate anything, but give everything to others. Having more, the more they give. It's a great lesson. My son Sands, who's, we're very, very close. We just spent a couple of months together over in Maui, just being together, just being. It was a divine time. And he came home with, it was last summer, he came home with 4 T-shirts that he loved. And I said, well, honey, I said, which one do you like the best? He said, well, that one over there, that blue one, it's got the writing, and it's got the drawing, and it's got a surfer, and it's got, I said, that's great. I said, I'd like to have that one. He said, no, Dad, that's my favorite. That's the one I like the best. I said, I know. I said, that's the one. Would you mind if I had that one? He said, I would mind a lot if you had that one. He said, maybe you can have one. I'm not so crazy about this one over here. I said, so you're going to give me something you don't like? I said, that's the one. I love that because we have the same taste. Could I have that one? He said, Dad, you're crazy. He said, you can't have my favorite T-shirt. I said, well, I want you to think about that. I want you to think about detaching and letting go and not needing to have more. And he's heard me talk about this stuff his entire life. So finally, he just, I went in and I tried it on and I said, this thing looks so great. Looking in the mirror and thinking, he said, Dad, that really is mine. I said, yeah. I said, but you're going to give it to me. He said, no. I said, yeah, well, just think about it, because I'm your dad, and I'd really like to have this. And so he reluctantly parted with it. And so that evening, I was still wearing the shirt, and he looked at me and he said, oh, that's my shirt. I said, Sands, I said, you gave me the shirt. I said, I'm going to wear this shirt until you are happy that I have your favorite shirt. I'm never going to take it off until you are happy. He said, well, you'll be wearing that shirt a long time. I said, well, that's okay. So I wore it the next day. I got up. I slept in it that night. I got up I did. I got up the next morning. I put it on, and that Sands would come in and he'd look at me. I said, oh, you're still not happy that you gave me something that you really love, because this is what it really means to be a sage. This is what it means to be a divine being, to be someone who's willing to depart with not the things they don't like, but what they do like. I wore it the next day. I wore it the next day. I wore it for 2 weeks. Take it off only to wash it, put it right back on. 2 solid weeks. Each one of my children will tell you. Finally, one day he said, Dad, I'm so happy. I am so thrilled that you have that T-shirt. I said, oh, that's great. I can finally take this thing off. I'm going to just give it away. But it's like, what a great lesson in that. The idea that you take, there's a rule. It's called the 80-20 rule. And in the 80-20 rule, it says everything that you have, all of your stuff, 20% of it is what you use. All of your clothes in your closet, 20%. You just keep using the same 20% over and over. 80% of the clothing that you have in your closet, for so many people, is something that you never use, you don't wear. You look at it, you store it, you think, well, there might come a day, oh, I can't part with that, even though you've been carting it around. Every time you move it and you put it. Take the 80% that you don't use, says Lao Tzu, and give it away. Give it away. Lao Tzu said that when your cup is full, stop pouring. When your cup is full, stop pouring. We have an obesity crisis in the United States, in the Western world. The obesity crisis can be handled if you just read the Tao. If you realize, in verse 33, it says, if you realize you have enough, you are truly rich. If you could just learn something called portion control, where you just take a bite and you say, is my cup full? Stop pouring. Stop pouring. In other words, instead of filling yourself with that which is already a surplus, in the Tao it teaches us to take surpluses and to reduce them, and to take deficiencies and increase them, so that we create balance in our lives, to be in balance. You can take the jewelry that you don't use. You can take the clothing, and then once you've given away the 80% that you don't use, take one of the things that you really like and practice giving that away. It's such a wonderful way. Listen to this poem. It was written by a great Persian poet named Hafiz. It says, even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, you owe me. Just look what happens with a love like that. It lights up the whole sky. It lights up the whole sky. There's no owing. There's no owing. You don't have to be, you can practice living in a state of contentment. This was so powerful for me. You just can't imagine how good it felt for one entire year to walk through every day and say, I'm content. I'm content. I start out every morning of my life. The first words, Hafiz says, if there's only one prayer that you say every day, make it thank you. Just say thank you. That's how I start. Wake up, thank you, God. Thank you. Thank you, Source. Thank you, Tao. Whatever you want to call. The opening line of the Tao says, the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. As soon as you put a name on it, it dissolves. There's no name for it. It's just endlessly, invisibly, constantly in a state of creating out of a state of love. The next thought that the Tao teaches us to change. Change your thoughts. Change your life. You really do. See, so much of the previous PBS specials that I've done on inspiration and intention, these were teaching people generically how to think differently. What Lao Tzu taught me was what to specifically think in place of thinking that. Instead of thinking that I don't trust my nature, he said, trust your nature. Instead of saying, I need more, he said, you need less. More is less. That comes right out of the Tao. Next thought. Move from thinking in a rigid way to thinking and being flexible, soft, and allowing. From rigidity to softness. What a wonderful transformation that is. I was standing looking at, with my son Sans, and we were on Maui, and we were looking at water. As water was going against some rocks and some cliffs and so on. And in these pictures, in this moment, I said to my son, I said, which do you think is stronger? The water or the cliff? The water or the rocks? Which one do you think is more powerful and stronger? And he said, well, he said, the rocks, obviously they're stronger and they're bigger and all. I said, water is very, very patient, isn't it? How much chance do those rocks have if they want to survive? I mean, what chance do they have? That would, and Lao Tzu is speaking to us about understanding our nature by examining how nature works and then making it apply to our thoughts. So that a soft thought, a thought that isn't a rigid thought, a thought that doesn't say, you have to be this way or you have to be that way, a thought that is not stiff, a thought that water, there are so many references to water and what we can learn from water. You're 75% water. The planet is 75% water. We are water. The rest of us is just muscled water. It's all water. And water is soft. Water can enter anywhere. You get into a conflict with somebody else, and you picture yourself as water. You can enter with water in any place that there's an opening. If you can visualize yourself as a being who moves into the space of water, if you can see yourself that way, you can just enter into those places in the people that you love, in your children, in your spouse, in anyone at all, and enter there softly. Here's verse 8. The supreme good is water, which nourishes all things without trying to. And verse 78, right smack out of the Tao. Nothing in the world is softer and weaker than water. But for attacking the hard, the unyielding, nothing can surpass it. There is nothing like it. Here it is. I asked when they designed this set, this beautiful set, and thank you designers for this, I asked if I could have water on the stage. They did it. They figured it out. There's Now, I'm going to try to get some of this water, okay? So you get down here and you just, I'm going to just scoop this up. And okay, now tighter you hold it, the less chance you have of doing anything with it, isn't it? How can I experience water? The way to experience water is to just get soft. Just get unbending. And there it is. That's what water is. The minute I grasp it, the minute I try. And Lao Tzu is saying the same thing is true in everything in your life. The more you grasp, the more you try to hold on to it, the more you try to be rigid with it, the less control you have of it. The softer you are, the less rigid you are, the more flexible you are as a person, the more you can accomplish. And this is a great way to practice in parenting as well. And this idea that a rigid thought, how many times have you heard this idea that if I tell you something, I'm going to stay consistent with it? We have a set of rules, these are the rules, and we'll do it this way. In the Tao it says the more rules you make, the more rule breakers you create. It's true. The more rules you have in your house about how everything has to go. We had in our house, my wife would have a big jar of M&Ms. Peanuts, all these different multicolored ones. And the kids in our house, because we didn't feed them sugar and we didn't give them sodas and stuff like that, so they were just more like a decoration. Every once in a while someone would take them, and they'd hardly ever be replaced. Now when we had kids come over to our house who weren't ever allowed to have such horrible things, you should have seen their behavior. They would scoop them up, they'd be putting them in their pockets, and they'd get their purses, and they'd open it up, and, the whole thing would be empty. I said, well, what are you doing? He said, well, you mean you could just have these whenever you want them? I said, well, we don't really have any rules about that. It's just, it's not something that we encourage or discourage. It's just there. It's like Emerson had a wonderful line. He said, a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. A foolish consistency, a rigid consistency. So that there are many people who will say, if I say it on Monday, you can be absolutely certain that on Wednesday, I'm going to believe the same thing, regardless of what might happen on Tuesday. Now, Tuesday might have something real that you might want to be changing your mind. You might want to say, I thought that this time, but now I've seen this, and now we can shift. And you can see how this can become, and so much about the Tao is on leadership. Leadership in the family, leadership in the community, leadership geopolitically. Less rigidity, more openness, more willingness to listen and say, I changed my mind. Because a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. And what I believed on Wednesday has changed because of what happened on Tuesday. Now, another important thing to say to your children, to your friends, to your lover, to your spouses, to whomever, to the people you work with, words that we're so terrified to say, but which give us a sense of living with the Tao. I don't know. I don't know. I'll look it up. Say it. I don't know. Doesn't hurt. Say it again. I don't know. Isn't it fearful? I mean, so many people, and it's like very freeing, because my kids ask me something, and I say, I don't know. They say, Dad, you know everything. You know everything. I say, well, I don't know that, and I'll look it up, or we'll try to find an answer to that, but I don't quite know. I know that I spent 20 years running, and I ran every day for 20 years. For 22 years, without missing a day. 8 miles. Never missed a day. That's rigid, all right? Some call that obsessive. But you brush your teeth every day, I used to say, and you don't call that obsessive. And you go to the bathroom every day, and you don't say, well, he's obsessively doing that again today. You don't do that. But anyway, what I learned is that even in the world of exercise, there are certain things that are built in to make us rigid, to make us stiff, to make us hard. And we lift, and we run, and we kick, and this is what we call working out. There's another kind of working out that is ancient. It goes back to the time of Lao Tzu and before, which is called yoga. And yoga means union. It means union with your source. And when you do yoga, you can stay in the same place. You can do the equivalent of 8 miles. When I used to run 8 miles, I had to run 4 miles that way, turn around, 4 miles back. And I'd be sweating. Now I can do yoga, and I can just stand in one place. And in 90 minutes, by being supple, by making myself stretch, by not being hard and rigid, I can get that out there, I can get that leg up, I can do these kinds of things. And 90 minutes later, it's like I'm totally sweating, and I feel so different. I used to, when I would go out at night to eat or something, after running so many miles, running marathons and doing those things, I'd go to get up, and it would be, okay, it's going to take a little while, right? Because everything was so like that. That doesn't happen anymore, because I've given up hard. I've given up being rigid and substituted it for being supple, for being flexible, for living a life in which I don't have to always be so fierce. Listen to this verse of the Tao Te Ching. It's one of my all-time favorites, verse number 76. A man is born gentle and weak. At his death, he becomes hard and stiff. All things, including the grass and the trees, are soft and pliable in life, dry and brittle in death. Stiffness is thus a companion in death. Flexibility is a companion in life. And it's not just for how you exercise, it's how you think. How you think.